to the Fitness Blueprint Podcast. My name is Jackson Adamowitz. Today we are going to be talking about flexibility and mobility. More specifically, we're going to distinguish between those two categories. We're going to define them. We are going to talk about why you should increase your flexibility and mobility. We're going to talk about how you can increase your flexibility and mobility. And we're going to talk about how you can implement flexibility or mobility training into your fitness or daily regimen. So before we dive down the rabbit hole of flexibility and mobility, I think it's important to define each one. So flexibility is the ability for our soft tissues in our body, so our muscles, tendons, joints, ligaments, etc. It's their ability to move through an unrestricted and pain-free motion. Usually this refers to a passive movement through a pain-free motion, right? So when you're stretching something, it's usually a passive movement. So you're kind of forcing your body into that position. You're not contracting your muscles while you're doing it. Now, mobility is kind of the opposite in a sense that it's the ability of a joint to move actively through a range of motion. So this is while your muscles are active, this is while you are contracting or just moving in a general movement pattern. So the differences between these, one is passive flexibility, one is active, but you typically need flexibility in order to be mobile. Basically, that means if you can't passively move your body into a certain position, there's a good chance that you won't be able to actively do that through mobility. So throughout this episode, I'm mostly going to be referring to flexibility because you need flexibility to be mobile, but they kind of go hand in hand. So why is it important to be flexible or mobile? Well, if you don't have an adequate amount of mobility or flexibility, you can't perform certain activities of daily living. So think about simple things like washing your hair. You need a certain level of flexibility and mobility to reach the top of your scalp. Think about scratching your back. If you've got an itch that needs to be scratched, you're going to want to have the mobility in order to do that. Think about getting in and out of a car. Think about tying your shoe, and think about toileting or bathing yourself, right? Keeping yourself clean, personal hygiene. If you don't have adequate flexibility, you won't be able to do those things independently. So as you can probably tell, a lack of mobility can lead to a lack of independence, especially as we age. A lack of flexibility can also potentially lead to postural or muscular imbalances in our body, which could cascade into a number of different problems, pains, injuries, etc. And then additionally, if you're training for certain sports or events, you might need a certain level of flexibility to accomplish what is needed to be accomplished in that sport. And I mentioned posture a little bit earlier, and I kind of want to digress a little bit from our flexibility and mobility talk for a second. And I want to kind of give a disclaimer. There's not one correct posture, right? We see pictures of ideal posture, but typically a posture itself is not pathological, meaning the posture itself is not the thing that's causing pain. However, a postural imbalance can lead to certain things that will cause pain. Let me dive into that a little bit more. So someone with the worst forward head posture, for example, right? So kind of slouched shoulders, head forward. We see this a lot with people who work at their desks or work on a computer all day. So they may not be painful, or this might not cause any disruption to their daily habits through their daily functions, right? Their posture is not the thing that is going to cause that pain. However, poor posture might cause a decrease in certain functions in comparison to a more proper or upright posture. Do me a favor and slouch. So give yourself like a really hunched over posture. Now take in as much air as possible. Take a really deep breath. Now before exhaling, return to an upright posture. Now try and take in some more air. You probably notice that you can inhale even more air when you're upright in a proper posture. If you're not watching this video and you're just listening, I'm kind of putting air quotes around proper because there's not one true proper posture. Right, so now we'll do the reverse. Start in an upright position, right? The best upright posture you can possibly do, and take in as much air as possible. Now slouch and try and take in more air. You probably can't, or it's probably a struggle. You might even cough out some more air. And the reason for this is because when we're in that strong upright posture, we can typically take in more air within our lungs. So that is just one of the functional benefits of a upright posture. Oh, yes, your posture is not guaranteed to cause pain or pathology, but you can probably tell that it can affect certain bodily functions, such as taking in air, such as positioning of our muscles within our body, etc. All right, back to the topic of flexibility and mobility. So, the next question that I want to address is how do we get more flexible, right? We're going to kind of take a little dive into the science behind flexibility because there are a lot of misconceptions behind what actually happens when we get flexible. And I'll give a little disclaimer before explaining any of this. And the truth is, nobody really knows exactly how we gain flexibility. There are some theories out there. We're going to kind of talk through a few of them, talk about what evidence is proposed for each of these theories. Stretching and increasing flexibility might work a little bit differently than what we thought 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, and it probably will change within the next 30 years. So before we talk about these theories, I want you to think about your muscles like elastic bands. So when you stretch them, it feels like they're getting a little bit longer, right? Like when you do some sort of stretch, they feel like they're kind of lengthening as you continue to kind of pull on that muscle. Traditionally, people thought that when you stretch and feel your muscles become more flexible, it was because the muscles were physically getting longer, just like pulling on that elastic band, right? It's actually getting longer. We're lengthening our muscles. That was the original thought. However, more recent research suggests that there's a different story behind that increase in flexibility. So it turns out that when people who don't have any muscular problems, right, so no injuries, no pathologies, they're asymptomatic, when they stretch and find their muscles feel more flexible right after that stretching, or even after doing stretching regularly for a few weeks, it's not really because the muscles are stretching out like elastic bands. Instead, what's happening is more about how their feelings change or how their body perceives their own flexibility. So the stretching makes them feel like their muscles are more flexible, even if the muscles actually haven't physically lengthened. So let's dive into the theories. So one of the areas that these theories surround is the idea of stiffness, or kind of the composition of muscle. But studies have shown that there's not really any signs of any deformation or changing the muscle structure or anything like that when you stretch. Then there's that idea of increasing muscle length. In a short answer, this isn't really what seems to be happening. So the only study in humans to show a change in sarcomeres, which are kind of the functional components of muscles, right? So they're kind of in a series within a muscle. The only study in humans to show a change in those sarcomeres is from a limb lengthening technique called osteogenic distraction. So not after regular stretching, but after an actual medical procedure. So why do we always hear that your muscles get longer when you stretch, right? This is a pretty common belief. Well, that's because there are plenty of animal studies out there that have been generalized to humans. These animal studies show that you increase the number of sarcomeres in series, or that functional muscular component. But as I mentioned, there have been no human studies to show this to be the case yet. So kind of the last bucket of theories ties into the idea of stretch tolerance. And in short, this might be the answer. So when you stretch something, you have a certain tolerance towards it, right? So the end point of a stretch is determined by one's tolerance or sensation of that stretch, right? So maybe towards the end of a stretch, you feel some sort of pain. You'll feel that maximum stretch feeling. So the idea behind this sensory theory, or this kind of toleration of the stretch, is that as you continue to stretch your muscles, you kind of increase your tolerance over time. And there's some evidence for this. Again, these are just theories, but we're not 100% sure of what exactly happens when we stretch in order to increase our flexibility. So putting all of those theories aside, let's talk about why we should stretch, right? If we're not really lengthening the muscle, what's the importance of it? Well, even though you might not be lengthening the muscle per se, you can increase your flexibility. That has been pretty much proven to be true. Think about some of the common reasons you might be interested in stretching. Is it to reduce your chance of injury? Well, there's not enough evidence to support that stretching actually reduces your risk for injury. Do you stretch to increase your sports or athletic performance? Well, if you're stretching before a sports or performance event, there's actually evidence that static stretching can decrease power output and your muscular function. However, regular stretching, so if you do something at least 3 times a week or even up to 7 days a week, this can actually improve your muscular power and force. So, do you stretch to improve recovery? Well, the truth is, there's not really evidence to show that stretching can improve your recovery. So, there have been about 5 studies, as we know right now, examining this very idea that stretching reduces DOMS. DOMS stands for delayed onset muscle soreness. This is that feeling that you get maybe 24 to 48 hours after a really challenging workout. And none of these studies showed that stretching can actually decrease that feeling of DOMS or that muscle soreness. So you're probably wondering, why the heck do we stretch anyways? If it's not to improve recovery, if it's not to reduce risk for injury, if it's not to boost athletic performance when done before some sort of sporting event, why do we stretch? Well, we stretch to increase flexibility, right? So we can work on improving posture, decreasing muscular imbalances. We also know that it's good for improving muscle functional performance when it's done regularly. But there's nothing really bad about flexibility training or stretching. So as we know right now, it's not going to increase your injury risk. It's not going to make you even more sore. So if you like stretching before a workout, go for it. If your goal is not necessarily to have a crazy muscular power output or to maximize your muscular performance, if you're just stretching to warm up because you enjoy doing it, there's not really that big of a problem around it. And again, when it's performed regularly, you can improve your range of motion, you can improve your circulation, so improve your blood flow throughout your body, and you can increase that flexibility, which is necessary, as I mentioned, for increasing your mobility as you age. It's necessary for certain sports performance and decreasing those muscular imbalances. So now I kind of want to go down a bulleted list of some stretching essentials that you should know, or that if you want to maximize the benefits of stretching, you should follow. Number 1 is you can perform the stretching session as its own session, or performing it after exercise has been shown to be very beneficial. Another pearl that you should follow is know what muscle that you want to stretch and why. A quick Google search can tell you good stretches for a certain muscle group and provide you with about 1,000 stretches. There are some good ones, some bad ones, but most of the time the top results will give you the best stretches for whatever muscle group you're looking for. When stretching, you'll want to hold the stretch for at least 30 seconds every stretch repetition. While stretching, don't bounce or do anything crazy while you're in the stretch. You should just kind of stretch before you reach that pain point, kind of that you'll feel that stretching feeling, right? So stretch until you feel that stretching feeling. Make sure that you're breathing regularly, right? Don't hold your breath while you're in a stretch. Make sure that you stretch each side of your body equally. And if you want to perform some sort of stretching before a workout, try some sort of dynamic workout instead of more of a static stretching position. We'll talk all about warming up and cooling down from workouts a lot more in future podcast episodes, but also if you want to look at more of a warm up and cool down regimen, I would encourage you to look at the cardio podcast episodes and the resistance training podcast episodes. And then last but certainly not least, I want to give you a specific flexibility or mobility protocol that you can follow and that will maximize the benefits of your stretching regimen. So I would recommend stretching at least 3 times a week, and you can do it up to every day. This is not going to cause immense soreness. This is not going to decrease your performance if it's something that you do on a daily basis. But again, with anything, you can overdo it. So there's no need to be stretching hours and hours on end. When stretching, aim for 3 to 5 repetitions of those 30-second static holds for whatever muscle group you're working on. And stretch into that slight discomfort or that stretching feeling. Never stretch into anything that's super painful. Something that I like to do is I like to incorporate this stretching after a workout. So after a long run, I will really stretch out my legs, my hip flexors, calves. I might even stretch my upper body a little bit. But I usually try to aim for 3 to 5 days of some type of flexibility or stretching protocol. So if you're looking to incorporate stretching or flexibility or mobility training into your routine, I would encourage you to follow these tips. Again, our flexibility tends to decrease significantly as we age, so maintaining this level of mobility is going to be crucial for your independence, your function, and again, if you are working towards a certain sport or a certain physical accomplishment, you might need a certain level of flexibility to accomplish what you're hoping to. If you have any questions whatsoever, head over to jacksonryanfitness.com, shoot me a message, there's a contact form there, or if you want to see any specific topics on the future podcast episodes, let me know. Thank you again for all of your support. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Jackson Ryan Fitness. Make sure you give the podcast a rating. We love those 5-star ratings, and let me know what you think about every podcast episode. Our next episode, we're going to talk about weight loss, so make sure that you subscribe and stick around to hear our future episodes of the Fitness Blueprint podcast. Thank you for joining me today.